Hello! Welcome back to the library. Let's try something different for a change. In August of 2010, I was still working at GameStop when a few of my regular customers came in. They were trying to organize a group of people to create an indie game in the same style as Pokemon, named Runic Hunter. A coworker had mentioned my art background, and I was invited to lunch to talk shop and discuss the plan. It sounded intriguing, and I had never done anything like that before in my whole life. So I figured why not. A day or two later, over lunch at the local place, we set up the first meeting. Between that and the second meeting, all of the artwork and concepts you see here were produced. Regretfully, the project never got past these first few stages or weeks due to various reasons, but the art remains. I figured 15 years was enough time for any NDA type stuff, which there was none, to have expired, and I could share my one-time attempt at being a concept artist with you guys. Let's start at the very beginning, the spiral notebook. There is just something about opening a 15-year-old spiral and seeing how illegible your writing was and still is. The first notes to be taken were for the opening movie. The game's lead ran down his thoughts, and I acted like a stenographer, rapidly writing down his stream of consciousness, while trying to make video and editing notes as I went. On the website, if you treat each storyboard as a slide, the numbers mark each slide and sequence. When multiple numbers are in a single circle, it means I needed to have each frame transition into the next. Once we had gotten through that, there were some quick sketch ideas for the main playable hunters. These would have been fleshed out later in the process. On the last page of the spiral, there were these squares. I believe were me quickly jotting down out a map of the first area for reference. Next up, storyboarding. Once I had the notes from above, the next step was to storyboard the events visually. This would give the artist the roadmap they would need to start creating the slides for the opening of the game. While the storyboards are in numerical order, the last 2 pages I have scanned in show alternate takes on 4 previous panels. These focus on either dynamic shadow concepts or different camera angles for the scene. While there are random animation and image notes in the margins you can enjoy, above each slide is the narration it would have been timed to, so you can actually see the story. Had the audio for the sequence been recorded, some slides would have likely been cut out due to their selected speech happening far too quickly for the image to resonate in one's eyes. Assets that we didn't have or didn't even know what they might look like were left blank or just added in as text. Next up was sequencing. This was a mental map put to paper of what the battle screen might have looked like. Small stuff includes the production notes of sprite tile sizes, character locations, and animation levels. The main point of this was for me to understand how many choices would be available in battle, and then translate those into animation checklists. So the normal phase might include images of characters in various dialogue poses and expressions. But then I would need to map out the animations for each attack, which include taking a hit, throwing the attack, confusion, etc. Probably the scariest part of the entire process because you realize just how large the shopping list for needed art is once you get through this. Now, if you're going to be collecting monsters, you're going to need various classes. This was my favorite part of the whole process, as I was mostly given free rein to throw everything to the wall and see what stuck. Many ideas focus on trying to do what no one else had done before at the time 15 years ago. Ones I held close to my heart were the rock golems, particularly the car types, but more on that in a second. Let's start with the earth class. The earth types only got so far as the rock golems I just mentioned, plus a dwarf. I was fascinated by how I could exploit rocks and pebbles. The car characters were a hoot to draw. I liked the idea of the one evolving into a catapult. The dwarf likes would have had several classes, each based around chess pieces. So you'd have a dwarf in a tower, a female dwarf for the queen, etc. The only one I got to was the banner carrier. I imagined him as the knight, since in one evolution he'd be riding on top of his banner, like a horse. Next up was the fire class. Fire types were my first creatures to be put to paper. My thought process started with, how do I turn a flame into a being that isn't the human torch? And that turned into, what animals would be freaky with liquid hot magma oozing out of them. The rhino-like creature was the first creature I really focused on with details and understanding how cooled bits of lava could become decoration, armor, or more. If you check out the images on the site, the numbers written around his body, I believe, were the pen nib sizes I was experimenting with. You can also see he was one of the only creatures to make it to the lore stage of the concept. The dragon, I think, was me trying to see what types could be possibly crossed over into each other. His head is clearly a fire type, but his body looks more like I was trying to sort out between earth or even a wind type. I guess we'll never know. The Mystic class. This one was fun for me because I wanted to see just how goofy I could get with it. There was this portal being who would only have had the body part hanging out of the portal that he was using at the time. So if he was using mental attacks, just the head would be available. If it was a punch or a kick, it would just be his hand or foot being visible. It looked really goofy, and I think it could have worked had this made it. The Mystic Turtle was my favorite concept of them all. It would have had a shell whose individual shingles, for lack of a better phrase, would be manipulated into various objects. Imagine if a Green Lantern were limited to just using a deck of playing cards as his pieces to use. It would have definitely been a tank-like character. The birds may have been from a wind category I never got to, but they were in the Mystic folder, so I'm just including them here. Now, of course, the female character was a running joke to the Japanese culture we are referencing as a whole. In anime, there is always that how is this allowed in a kid's show risque female character. The joke here was that while she was technically naked with no parts ever actually drawn, her shattered crystal ball pieces would have always been floating in just the right spots to always cover her up. I would have made the important glass pieces much larger than the actual game sprites. They're a little bit too small here. The snake would have been a healing type character based around the actual real-world medical logo with the twin snakes. No relation to Solid. The Techno class was going to be my playground. Being old enough to have lived through every iteration of computer and ongoing technology, these monster types would have been spins on typical D&D cliches. The computer tower as a treasure chest mimic still makes me giggle to this day. It's probably one of the funniest things I've ever drawn. There were also music concepts like an audio wave made to look like a worm, aka the earworm song. I think the butterfly-like one was supposed to be a set of file systems where each folder path was part of the wing setup. The Techno Buzzsaw puppy might have been a bit much. He was coming from the construction technology angle, like a giant earth mover but reduced to something cute and adorable. The torso was likely just me doing a color study with my markers. Water class was where I started playing with limitations, as in, if I had an octopus, and only an octopus, how many different attacks could I create from just the 8 tentacles? Besides the Gatling gun and other ideas, I also tried using them as props or makeup to change the age of one. Curling the tentacles around so they appeared as a fancy mustache and beard made it look like an old southern general. The shark-like creature was the only attempt at animation I ever got made. It gave perspective on how many frames would be needed per action. The other limitation was, if these guys lived in the ocean, what do they exclusively have access to? The shark-like soldiers would have had different tiers of armor based on that angle. So, repurposed seashells and algae, human diving equipment remains, and even the bones of other animals came into play. The zombies, there aren't much here. I had just started concepting them when we realized that the party was over, so there's not much here. My idea for this class was going to be a mixture of payback and visual storytelling. The zombie samurai would have had one attack for each sword lodged in his chest, pulling it out, using it, and then reinserting it back into himself rather than the scabbard, essentially sharing his fate with you. The floating bone creature, I believe, would have had its evolutions based on which creatures you fought the most. So if you spent hours defeating water type, sea creature bones would be then added to them on the first evolution. This would have followed each next evolution, so 2 or 3 types of bones would be possible. It would have sucked to animate that many variations, but it would have made it a fan favorite to mess with. Never put to paper was a coffin concept I had. It would have been standing vertical, and the attack type would have dictated how the zombie inside would have looked and acted. If he's casting heal, he'll knock first, then open the door and look like a doctor. Cast a spell, the door flies open, and he's in a magician's garb with a wand. I think it would have worked. Next stuff that I got to were the towns, the runes you were collecting, and the characters. There was only really enough time to do a few of each. This included the bad guy's lair, which was a rundown circus where runes, the creatures, were always under lock and key. Opposite of that was a sort of free-range zoo environment for the good guys and their runes. I wanted it to be a little too on the nose to allow players a sense of emptiness when they saw how the villains treated their creatures. One of the coolest concepts was the fire class town. It would have had magma pipes in place of neon tubing. The city would have always been shown at slightly darker evening times to really make the magma pipes glow. Miscellaneous thoughts put to paper also included possible battle and scene locations within the towns, with the background visuals to help sell the atmosphere and the vibe of the location. As I mentioned earlier, a few of the player type characters with 2 NPCs made it to paper, along with full color explanation of the runes and their first draft origin ideas. You can check it out on the website. Alright guys, there you go. Yeah, it was kind of crazy. Like I had so much fun just sitting with a blank piece of paper trying to figure out, for lack of a better phrase, where Nomad had gone before. I don't know if my art style would translate into like modern day type games or indie games, but I think it'd be really, really fun to try and hack at it again. Like it just allows for so much imagination to just pour out. If you have any questions about the process, etc., hit me up in the comment section below. I'll have the link to Game-Rave's website where you can see all the scans and the little animation of the shark guy. All right, guys. This will be the last Game-Rave TV for 2025. We are going on hiatus till January 1st. If you guys hope you're doing okay, stay warm, enjoy your holiday, play some games, and relax. I'm here when you need me. Take care, guys. I'll see you on the Discord.